Hello, and welcome again to this week's weekly conversation with Lety, life coach, and myself, Rachel G. Hi, Lety.
Hi, everybody. Hi, Rachel.
Hi. So, today we're going to be talking about material boundaries, which are the boundaries that you set when you invest in other people. Now, let's break this down a little bit further. It's the material boundaries you set when you are deciding whether or not to lend or give something to someone. Our material boundaries can be tested in romantic relationships, spouses, partners, at work, with friends and family, and in public. Healthy boundaries across all of these areas are important because, well, they concern what you physically share with others or you choose not to share. And they also include how you spend your time, your money, and your presence. Now, a good example of a personal belonging, your time, and your labor would be, let's say, a person who owns a pickup truck. Now, quite likely that person will be asked more often than not by friends or family to help them to move, to pick up those larger things for them. I think we've all had someone like that in a family or somebody as a friend. Now, material boundaries can get violated also because, well, let's say somebody steals from you, or maybe they even return something, they borrow it, but it's been damaged. And there are also those that really actually never return your property. And you're the one who's always chasing for it, right, Letitia?
Yeah, my dear. Yeah, my goodness. How many of you have lent a book or books and have them returned to you damaged or even never returned? So, and afterward, you have to go chasing after the person and feel like the unfair person is you. And this was drive me crazy back at the time when we were lending many books. I was lending many boats. Anyway, so talking about boundaries, boundaries are harder to set with friends, family, and partner, and material boundaries are not exception. In the context of material boundaries, a strong sense of guilt
Mhm.
arises
Yeah.
that we don't feel with the physical boundaries or the sexual boundaries. In this case, we feel that guilt because it's about something that the people expect us to give them, especially from with friends and family. Because when you say when friends and family want something from us that they need, they don't expect no as an answer, and
No.
they will likely attack you. So from this point of view, I was among those people, have to be honest, who were disappointed when someone said not to me. And I learned to set my material boundaries as well as to respect those of others through my romantic relationship. Or honestly, last in my last romantic relationship, my partner is a very jealous person of his personal things and has very rigid boundaries, while I didn't give any value to my things and gave them away without thinking twice, thinking that by doing so I was showing love. That was my way of I give you everything that belongs to me, so that means that I love you. But he was behaving differently from me. And at first, I considered my partner refusal to use these things as gesture of non-love, to which I had to adapt, but with resentment. However, I noticed that his behavior towards my possession was not as rigid as it was in my things and his things. And because of the resentment that I felt, I also began to put my foot down and assert that I didn't share what was mine. So, what I didn't realize in the beginning was that I was learning to value the things that belong to me. And as a result, I was learning to give myself value. And as for him, noticing that I had set the same rigid boundaries, almost as if we were like two strangers sharing the same house, he began to soften his boundaries and spontaneously tell me that if I wanted something that belongs to him, I could feel free to do so. So, in my particular situation, my partner and I were able to transmute our extremes. He was too rigid, he was having too rigid boundaries, and I was on the other side of the spectrum too weak boundaries, we reach healthy boundaries. And it's not that easy all the time.
Yeah, no. So I mean, really, the sooner that we can share, with our partners what our beliefs and our ideas are around our possessions, then really the better. And speaking up and sharing what, we're okay with, and what we're not okay with is really the best way, I think, to approach this, because it really avoids that confusion and misunderstanding just further on down the line in a relationship. Of course, though, if you are already in a long term relationship and your material boundaries have never really truly been respected, then most likely it is that, the same with all the other personal boundaries that you have going on. So it's going to maybe take a little bit of work. But whenever you do decide to change your behavior, and setting boundaries is that you are changing your behavior, it's going to generate an uncomfortableness, maybe in yourself, but also in the other person. And it could cause them to maybe feel threatened, or, even that feeling that they need to defend themselves. I struggled in the beginning within a relationship that I had to recognize a material boundary of when I had given, like, when had I given enough of my time? When you start a relationship, you're always like, really into it, and you want to be with each other 24/7. And then there comes a moment for me where it was like, well, I need my own time. I need time for myself. And I'd start to notice gradually that I would just cause little arguments, because I was getting annoyed. I'd be nitpicking, for really no reason at all. But the underlying thing was that I needed some just time for me, and I'm sure that there are many people listening who, that's also important to them. But it's one of those things you can easily put to the bottom of your list, because you're not consciously aware that that's something that you've kind of given up on. You know what I mean?
I totally agree. Totally agree. And I mean, it's so common that in the beginning of the relationship, we are all about giving our time, and we expect that it keeps on being like that. But then there is a time that whether it's you or the partner saying like, oh, hey, now I need my own space, and how do we take it? Yeah, and speaking about relationship, we experience issues with material boundaries even within the work environment, where we deal with colleagues
Mhm.
with whom we have some form of connection. It's a connection that we need to build and maintain because we spend a large percentage of our time with them, and they become a kind of a second family, whether we like it or not. I know right now with this COVID situation is different because we are working, we have the smart working, but back at the time when we were all working together, I mean, we also need to have to set material boundaries in that context. And the difference here is that the material boundaries really relates more to the aspect of being what is politically
Mhm.
correct or not. Let's remember that when we talk about material boundaries, we are not just talking about physical things, but we are also talking about our time, work, intellectual property, influence. And personally, I'm a person who shares a lot in the work environment. For example, if I'm working in a team on a project and during my research, I found something that can be useful not only to me, but also to the team, I immediately share everything. And this is not really reciprocated in the same way by colleagues who keep the information they find to themselves. And generally, what they do it just because they want to elevate themselves in the eyes of others, especially with their superior. So I have to adjust my material boundaries in this case, and I have to learn to have this healthy material boundaries just by. And I learned in a way that it was like bouncing from having overweak boundaries where I was sharing everything to extremely rigid boundaries where I was keeping everything for myself. So now whether we have this opportunity to go back in a context where we share things with other, now I'm able to share information on or my materials when I feel it is appropriate to do so, and especially if what I hold is essential to the team. So that's my way of learning health material boundaries.
Yeah, that's great that you had to experience both to find somewhere in the middle that's like, ends up being something comfortable and works for both of you. So, both ways. It's interesting, isn't it, how we find ourselves in a group or a team of people and we tend to behave differently than in our one-to-one relationships. We can we take different things into consideration. Maybe it's because of the hierarchy factor that also comes into play here, such as when you're dealing, certainly when you're dealing with your leader or maybe your leader's manager, basically anybody who has some kind of authority over your work. Um, and I find that this kind of interaction will call more for, more often than not, for the more thoughtful and polite approach, because there is a possible social or employment consequence if you don't. I think also taking the so-called soft approach sometimes, such as like avoiding in these situations, may not always necessarily actually be the best way to proceed. It's more effective and I think healthier to learn to actually speak up and let others know, where your boundaries are, and in whatever circumstance that that is being presented to you. Quite often in a workplace, there are those, let's say, I know when I was working in corporate, that those contributions that would circulate around the office or the organization, whether that be for the person's birthday, the retirement, or the birth of someone's baby, I don't know, there was always something. And this is really an example of a material boundary. Like, how am I going to approach this? Do I give each and every collection to those of you, to those that I know, or to the ones that I work closely with, or do I just not give at all? Those are the kind of thought process that are going through your head. And let me just say that whichever you choose is your choice. And yet we tend to kind of follow the crowd. But I just want everyone to know that it is okay to choose that you don't want to donate, or you don't want to have to do it each and every time. I've seen it play out in many different ways in work. And I think also there's a soft approach. I've seen, which is that people just pass it on. They don't say or do anything. They just kind of, you know, casually move it on to the next person. Whereas, like maybe a firm approach I've seen is that someone will just ask or just basically tell, I don't wish to be included in these such collections, and it's fine if it's my birthday. I don't wish to also have any collection done for me. And either way, I think find what's comfortable for you. And another example of a material boundary are those, let's say, where everybody meets up after work and you might get regularly invited. And then again, you're like, well, do I attend? Don't I? Sometimes never. And again, I just want people to know that it is a choice and it's not anybody else's. And, you can take this soft approach, would be, well, I'm just not going to show up. I've seen that many a time. But then there's the firmer approach, which is that you speak and you let somebody know, I won't be attending. There'll be those that will go into full-blown explanation, but I don't actually think that that's necessary. If you don't want to attend and the reason is your own personal reason, it's not something you need to exchange. I believe. Um, so
Yeah,
that's
I want to say something about that because when you were talking about the collection for the person a person's birthday, I remember a long time ago when that we were preparing like birthday cards, and when they were not, and I remember that I was signing all the birthday cards and I was trying to pick up the right words for everybody. So then when it was my time, my birthday, I was really checking if all the people that were in the card and if they were not, I mean, I was saying next time for their birthday I'm not gonna sign anymore. I remember that, and how, I mean, it's been such a long time, and now that I see that, I can see how these things, little things, play
yeah,
such a big role. I mean, now I'm looking at them like there is not, it's nothing, but at that time it was such a big thing.
yeah,
And obviously right now I would say like you, it's your choice. If you don't want to do it, it's your choice, right? And
absolutely.
so yeah. And so on my side, I want to say that things get complicated when these boundaries involve our time and availability to family. Or
Mm.
here we get so such in a big um, problem issue because our time availability get confused with love and care for others. So
Mm.
the people closest to us, in fact, many times take it for granted that we are always present, always positive about offering our time, our help, and doing favors. One example is I'm not a mother, but I could see
Yeah.
on other people that is to assume that grandparents take care of their children and babysit them because they think that they don't have anything better to do. And if the grandparents don't do it, then they are bad people, bad grandparents. You know, it's
That is just so true. Absolutely. I've witnessed it with friends over the years, or yeah. I think naturally for many friends and family is always going to be that hardest for them, for people to like set, enforce, and maintain their boundaries, and that can be for many reasons, right? I mean, often it probably relates to not actually really wanting to jeopardize their relationships with their family or their friends. They don't want to potentially escalate a situation that is going to cause a family feud, and they don't want to be outcasted, for not following
mm,
maybe a general tradition or a rule that has been in the family for generations. I don't know. Um, but there are times when you need to reject, and you need to say no to whatever that family member or that friend is requesting from you or proposing.
yeah.
um it's important for us to think about ourselves, and know that it's not being selfish. And like you did, that experiment, you might go from one extreme to the other with your boundaries, try these different approaches. If a family member is always asking, for example, money, um, you can opt for that soft approach, which would be to ignore them. Or you could just speak directly to them and explain, I can't lend you that money anymore. Maybe, you know, it's because you have your own bills to pay. So say that, or take a firmer approach. And that would be more like, I'm not actually prepared to lend you any more money until you pay back what you owe me. You have every right to say this, regardless of whether they're family or not. Um, okay, should
Even
we move
though,
on
sorry
to?
if I interrupt you, even though I recognize that it can be difficult because, especially when they play the victim, that they need this favor, they need this money, they need that, and then they really touch your heart. It's different than strangers. They really touch your heart because you feel like guilty if you are not there for them. So we need to be very careful because in this way we are enabling someone to keep on doing what they are doing, not to help themselves. So we are enabling them to keep on doing their own wars to
Yeah.
go through direction.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Couldn't agree more. I've had that experience within my own family. It's not wasn't to do with money. It was more to do from an alcohol perspective. But absolutely, all you're doing is you're not helping them in the long run.
No.
Yeah. Anyway, shall we move on to public boundaries? I
No,
mean,
yeah.
generally speaking, when we are kind of out in the public, we are interacting with, strangers. It can sometimes be people we know, sometimes that long lost friend or someone from school, or, a former employee, whatever it might be. But the point really is that we're not actually trying to build any kind of relationship when we're out in the public. It's much more to do with and related to being probably asked, to invest some time or your money into a community, into an organization, for you to support. I know, like, with my children playing football all the time, the children's sport club, they were always looking for these donations to support, the running, let's say, of the canteen. Also, that when you go to the supermarket, I get that quite often, and there's people there and they want you to sign a petition for a local cause, or it can also be a worldwide cause, but they want you to sign up for something. um, Or maybe, and this didn't happen, this happened not too long ago for me, is like, when someone is asking if, if they could borrow my phone, my mobile phone, because they wanted to call somebody to come and pick them up because their phone had died. And, yeah, so I was confronted. I did do it. I did lend it to them, but I have to say there was a moment that went through my head like, oh, is he going to run off my phone or whatever? But I did do it. Um, and in general, Letitia, maybe you have some tips that can cover both, the situations that I've just mentioned, and maybe for all the other types of material boundaries that we've covered so far.
Yeah, I do have some tips for them, but I'm going to be very brief. And know it that you can go from a soft way of approaching those who are crossing your boundaries to a firmer way. And these are, first of all, say yes or no to what you feel comfortable lending. So how do you know if you feel comfortable? I mean, and this question is also is particularly for all the people who are not used um, to set boundaries. So how do you know if you feel comfortable? Notice your physical sensation, and notice if you hear a faint voice saying, "Don't do it." Generally, it's our own wisdom talking, that we override with our programmed mind, saying like, oh, but this person needs it. In the case of the family, when we were talking before, but inside you, there is this faint voice that is telling you, don't do it. And you have a physical sensation. So try to listen just once,
Yeah.
this voice, and see what it brings to you. Then I have a second tips. Before lending something that is valuable to you, say so. Say it to the person. Say that is so valuable and precious for you. And then set a deadline for its return. Books, camera, whatever it is, money, whatever it is. Okay. And then third, set limits on time because your time is valuable. Set a time and stick to it. So if you are saying like, and I can see myself doing many times with the coaching session. So if the coaching session should be 1 hour, it's 1 hour. It's not 1 hour and 10, it's 1 hour and 15 minutes and slip into it. So set a time and you need to stick to it no matter what. Set limits on favors, services, labor, because you have a precious life just like the other people. And no is a complete sentence. If they insist, you can just say that no, it's already an answer, and you don't need to justify further your answer. So
Yeah.
these are my tips. I don't know if you want to say something more.
They're great. They're great tips, Letitia, as always. So my tip is really maybe more for those people who are like me, need to feel into whatever it is, into stuff before making decisions. I find myself in situations where I'm not really like, if I'm not really getting or being able the time to feel what it is that I need to feel to be able to make a decision, I actually start to feel a bit uncomfortable. I tend more often than not then to use basically different avoidance tactics. And I believe that there's nothing wrong in this. It actually is a great way to use, your body language and let it speak for you. So, for example, depending on what the situation is, you can just simply walk away, or you can just avoid the eye contact by looking down and walking away, or be obvious with your gestures, such as shaking your head, or even putting your arm out, whatever, saying no, go away, or do as if you haven't even heard anything. Some people might say that it's rude, but if you're feeling uncomfortable and you can't speak up, then I would suggest using those kind of like simple avoidance tactics. Again, I've done all of these at some time or another, and those kind of experiences have been mainly when those people who are standing on the streets, they want you to sign up to a newspaper, or people who want you to sign up to the lottery. We have a lot of that going on here in the Netherlands, and it's all the time, and I get a bit fed up with it, so that's what I do. I've also learned that there are situations in which I need to obviously speak up. In particular situations, um, where I need to be clearer, about my request to people so that they will respect my boundaries. And it can be done in both a soft or firm approach. And I found it necessary when to be firmer when someone is kind of badgering me constantly. And I've experienced this mainly when I've been on holiday, in certain parts of the world where maybe you're walking around markets or you're on the beach and you've got those people who constantly want to sell to you. And, I can be nice and polite and whatever, first time round, second time round, third time round. But there comes a moment when it's like, okay, I've had enough now. So in those instances, I'm clear but respectful, and I just say a hard no. And sometimes maybe even I'll follow up with, look, please stop asking. I'm not interested. And these, has proved to work in the past for me. So yeah, that's my little tips. So I think maybe we've kind of can wrap it up here. We've covered a lot. I believe that next week we're going to be diving into material boundaries, which um, yeah, what do they? Oh, they refer to our personal thought process. Yep, we all have a right to our own thoughts and our values and our beliefs and our opinions, right, Letizia?
Oh, absolutely. It's our birthright to express our values, thoughts, and opinion without feeling less than anybody else. So I think now it's time to say goodbye. If you liked this video, please click the like button, as this is the way YouTube works, and help us to get our video more reach. Write the comments and subscribe to our channel if you like to follow us and what we have to share. So bye for now from
Yep.
Letizia and
Rachel G. Bye bye.